Okay, so thank you for being here and good morning. I'd like to welcome, and it's my honor to welcome Iris Krasnow, Oak Park native and best-selling author. Iris Krasnow is very excited to be returning to West Suburban Temple Har Zion today, where her parents, Helene and Ted Krasnow, were active for many years. This is the place she attended from kindergarten through confirmation. So Iris has appeared today to talk about her books on love and family relationships that have earned her guest spots on numerous national media, including Oprah, The Today Show, Good Morning America, and All Things Considered. She is a longtime journalism professor at American University and is the senior editor of the AARP online publication, The Ethel, geared toward women over 50. Although her books feature various aspects of relationships, Iris says that what binds her work together is our shared quest to find passion and purpose and joy at every stage at life, with strong faith, strong families, and strong mission. The daughter of a Holocaust survivor, Iris will talk about all of this and how Judaism has been an overarching influence as she has navigated her own journey as an author, professor, wife of 33 years, and the mother of 4 sons, ages 31, 29, and 27-year-old twins. She lives in Annapolis, Maryland, although she visits the Chicago area often to visit her sister, who is also here, Fran Krasnow. I'd like to request that people do not go into the chat during the conversation, and Iris has some plans to answer questions, and I turn it over to her, and thank you very much for being with us.
Well, thank you so much. And I can't tell you what it feels like to see some familiar faces and to have people on this call that remember my parents who, my father died in February of 1986. He was only 67. His funeral, overflowing funeral, was in the sanctuary. And my mother, Helene, who I know some of you remember because we were chatting, some of her greatest joys were working in the temple gift shop, bowling and putting on theater performances with the sisterhood, being involved with Hadassah, and helping to cater so many of the events. And I don't remember what the room was called, but I can picture it. My father was vice president of the temple, and those beautiful Chagall windows that you see, his administration and him personally were very, very involved in getting those constructed, commissioned, constructed. And I think about those windows so often because I remember how proud and happy he was and how proud and happy our congregation was when that happened. So I've been a journalist for a long time, and I'm just, my sister and brother are with me today on this call, and that means so much. I think that Temple for me, and when I go to Chicago, I always drive by by the temple, and I always drive by our house at 926 Forest Oak Park, Illinois. And sometimes when I drive by our house, I knock on the door and I say, I used to live here, could I come in? And the first time the new superintendent of Oak Park High School had purchased our house, and they were very nice and let me come in. The second time I did that, the people said, well, you can go in the backyard. And I just, I did go in the backyard, and it was just so nice. So Oak Park is really the backbone of my life, growing up there and being, having really engaged parents who were engaged in so much charity work and very engaged in the temple has had a strong influence on who I've become, on the books I write. And I'll tell you a couple stories right now. One is Mr. Jablin. He was my Sunday school teacher, and I don't know if you remember him. My brother, who's on, remembers other teachers, and Miss Lewenstein and Mr. Gottlieb. But Mr. Jablin, I would say Mr. Jablin and my sister were really at the root of me becoming a journalist. Because Mr. Jablin, years ago, I remember he always had a lot of chalk on his hands. I don't know if people even write on chalkboards anymore. I'm a university professor and I write on a whiteboard, although right now I'm this baby Zoomer. I Zoom my classes for the past year. But Mr. Javelin used to have chalk on his hands and in his hair and a little bit on his face. And one day he wrote on the blackboard, who, what, where, when, why, and how. And he said, this is all you need to know in life is who, what, where, when, how, and why. And, and then he started explaining how that was what you needed to know, and that how curiosity about everything came down to that. And, when I teach journalism, I'm a journalism professor at American University for more than 30 years. And it really, when I teach my classes, it really does come down to who, what, where, when, why, and how. Mr. Jablin also told us, he taught us the word assimilation. We lived in a town of Oak Park. I don't know if Oak Park is very Jewish now. It was not very Jewish when I grew up there. I'm 66 years old. And happily, and hope to live till 102, like Doris Gruskin, who I'm going to talk about in a minute. I hope to live well until 102. But the word assimilation came up because there was a child in the class, and I remember him so perfectly. There was probably like 14 of us in this classroom, and I'm thinking of those 1950s, 60s desks. Remember those, desks, and I don't know what the Temple classrooms look like now. And a child was talking about how someone had called him not a dirty Jew, but a kike. And Mr. Jablin explained to us that the Jews were assimilating, that we had to assimilate into a culture and a society and a world that was not not only not predominantly Jewish, but a lot of people didn't really like the Jews. Or as my father used to say, like I would tell him some story, you go, oh, everyone hates the Jews. But and they don't. We know that. And another thing my father really didn't like, and I really don't like, is Jewish people who were anti-Jewish. And I remember that so strongly, and you know what I'm talking about. So the other gift from West Suburban Temple Har Zion, is that the Chicago Tribune did a story on Doris Gruskin, who was living in an assisted living, who really worked till she was 100 or 99. I think she drove until Nancy and her brother Mark said, listen, Mom, you're 98. It's time to give up the car keys. And at 97, Nancy will talk later. And so there was a Chicago Tribune article that said that Doris Gruskin had turned 102. And a lot of us commented on it, Nancy's old friends. And what resulted from that is as an every other Sunday Zoom group with my friends from the kindergarten class at Temple. I want to say Temple Beth Shalom because that's the temple we belong to. I live in Annapolis, Maryland. But what resulted from that Tribune story is Nancy got dozens of, oh my gosh, I can't believe Doris is 102. I mean, that's a ripe old age. But what resulted from that is Holly Nemirovsky, Holly Budd now, Debbie Markman Fine, Nancy Gruskin Warner, and Jill Holden, who, like Iris Krasnow, seems to have kept her last name. We decided that we were going to Zoom. And since that time, when Doris passed away in the fall, we Zoom every other Sunday at 2:00 East Coast time. And to tell you, and I don't have to remind all of us what a gift it is to have history holders in our lives. I mean, I'm gifted to have my sister Fran, who lives in Highland Park, and my brother Greg, who lives in Tucson. I mean, they're truly our history holders. But to have these friends who are my oldest of oldest friends, and certainly the treasure of friends who remember my parents. We talk about our parents, all the time. I forgot that my mother had worked at the gift shop, and Holly said, "Oh, I used to come into the gift shop, and your mom would talk to me all the time." And so that is truly, truly a gift. Holly uh, lived in Highland Park, uh, and but the rest of us went to Oak Park High, and we just have so many rich memories together. It's truly, truly, at the root of it is the temple. I must say, we came of age at a time when most girls at a conservative synagogue, I would say the majority of us did not have bat mitzvahs unless you pursued it. And, I did not pursue it. It was enough to get confirmed. But Debbie, I believe, had a bat mitzvah, and of course, and then Nancy. Debbie lives in Israel now, so we do have an Israeli component in this right now. Um, but I do remember one of the highlights beyond Mr. Jablin and beyond sitting in our beautiful sanctuary. And, Sunday school was something we did. We didn't always want to go, and I would want to say that our parents made us go, but it wasn't exactly like, oh God. But, it turned out to be something that I really did look forward to every Sunday because it was our connection with Jewish people. We went to horseman school, and there were several Jewish people in my class. David Horowitz, Danny Portis, um, uh, Debbie Glasser, and but it was really this artery of Judaism that meant so much to who I became. Faith is really one of the strong faith family are really the backbones of my own life and my work. My mother was a Holocaust survivor, and so we learned about Judaism in a different way very early on. We had two cousins who had numbers on their arms. Um, and so we really Judaism was more than Sunday school. However, I will admit that one of the really motivating factors for some of my sister, well, I know my brother and I, and maybe my sister too, is that my dad would pick us up after Sunday school. And I remember we would wait on the terrace and he would take us to Prince Castle on Harlem, which turned into a cock robin where they had square ice cream. And it was just like so great to go and have this greasy, wonderful burger after temple. So, my own family, I married a man named Charles Edward Anthony III. He was not Jewish. We raised it, and I say was, we raised four sons, as Peter described, all who had bar mitzvahs, including a twin bar mitzvah. And after we were married for, I want to say 19 years, my husband's an architect, and he was hired to rebuild, I call it our little shul on the prairie, because it was a little shul. We had about 300 members when I moved to Annapolis nearly 30 years ago, actually. We now have, close to 1,000 members. But the roof caved in. There was a snowstorm. And my husband, Chuck, was hired to rebuild the temple. They hired him. And during the process of meeting with Rabbi Ari Goldstein, um, it, Chuck, unbeknownst to me, was not only talking about going to Israel and picking Jerusalem stone, et cetera, he was converting. At their first meeting, Chuck said, I've been married to Iris for 19 years. We've had 4 bar mitzvahs. I don't really feel any religion. Their family was a lapsed Methodist. His father quit the Methodist church. He was a very conservative person. And I think there was something about the war. I think they actually started taking in conscientious objectors, and his dad was a war veteran. So unbeknownst to me, at their first meeting, Chuck said to the rabbi, Ari, I've got 4 Jewish kids. My wife's Jewish. My mother-in-law is a Holocaust survivor. What do I have to do to become Jewish? We're Reformed, by the way, so there wasn't a lot. Hebrew learning. And so as they met to talk about Jerusalem stone and how they wanted their vision for the new Temple Beth Shalom, Chuck was converting, again, unbeknownst to me. Um, and Ari and Chuck decided to go to Israel together with some of the other temple members. They do this every year. And they decided that while they were in Israel, that Chuck would convert at the wall. And so he and Ari went to the wall at dawn and he became Jewish. I was working at a summer camp that summer and I knew nothing about it. And when I tell this story, people say, oh my gosh, you must not have very good communication with your husband. Can you believe he did that? And here's what I say. My husband said to me, I wanted to become Jewish when I felt Jewish. And it was for our family. He was so tired of people saying, I know one of you is not Jewish. And he kind of looks like a rabbi. And sometimes they actually thought I was the one that wasn't Jewish. And he said he was so tired of saying, we're a Jewish family. And he just said, we're all Jewish. And he said to me something that a lot of people, and I know that you have daughters and sons and grandkids who might marry somebody who's not Jewish and that they convert right at the minute that they marry because they feel like one of the relatives feels really strongly or one of the parents like you got to marry a Jew. And Chuck said, I didn't want to become Jewish until I felt Jewish. And it's really been so powerful. He's the one who drives us drives our family to go to Friday night services. He knows so much more than I know about our history, certainly about our architecture. And so that's been really, really, really a gift. My parents' involvement in the temple really has inspired my own involvement at our temple. I've been on the board of our temple on and off. I was not only on the director of the nursery school, I taught the nursery school class because when we moved to Annapolis, the nursery school teacher uh, got pregnant and married at the same time, and they needed a teacher, and so it was me. My husband built the temple. And so the fact that I'm here with you today at the temple of my youth just means so much. So, flash forward, I've written 7 books. My most recent is about summer camp. I still work at the summer camp of my youth, Camp Agawak for Girls in Minocqua, Wisconsin. And I said that my sister inspired my writing career, and we both started Camp Agawak when I was 8 and she was 9. And we had a camp magazine called Agalog, and I wrote every week. And my sister would always say to me, "Gosh, you're such a good writer. You're such a good writer." Um, and after college, I majored in photography, and I was going to pursue photography. And my sister said, something like, "Well, you can always take pictures with your stories. You should be a journalist." So my first book was called Surrendering to Motherhood, and it was written when we had 4 sons under the age of 3. Twins made that happen. Um, the twins don't look alike, and I hope this story isn't too. It's not off. It's not distasteful, and I'm not going to swear. But the twins don't look alike, and often I would, have this double stroller, and I would go places, and people would say, "Oh, are those both your kids?" And I'd say, "Yeah." And they would say, "Well, they don't look alike," and I'd say, "Oh, I know different husbands," and just walk away. Anyway, that really would stop them from talking to me about things like that. So I've written Surrendering to Motherhood, Surrendering to Marriage, Surrendering to Yourself. I Am My Mother's Daughter. What else? The Secret Lives of Wives, Sex After, Women Share How Intimacy Changes as Life Changes. We won't talk about that today. And my last book, which was published ironically in April of 2020, when camps were closing and when the pandemic was starting. And it was my first summer in 7 years not going back to my camp. So I went to this camp with my sister. I went from 1963 to 1973, and I loved writing for Agalog. I mean, it really was just so affirming. What's so affirming is that when you love to do something and you have people who you love in your life telling you you're good at it. So you've got passion, you've got the support, and if you get that early on, it could be the roots of a long running career. And for me, it really was to get the affirmation, you write well, and I love to write. I mean, I always feel, I tell my students this, and I tell myself this as I, you know, turn 66 and sometimes feel 26 and a lot of times look 86. Or, and by the way, if you're 86, you look great. But during this pandemic, it's been such a dark tunnel. But writing is really about writing through the dark tunnels into the light. That's how I always feel. It's so emancipating and cathartic. Some of you might be writers yourself and you publish articles. But for me, it was a gift given to me so early on, reinforced by my parents, my family, my sister, my brother. And my books, I would say, are all, even though they're different, it's all about how to sustain loving relationships. And, you know, my last book, Camp Girls, I skipped 40 years at Camp Agawak for Girls, and I was at our 91st reunion. And the new owner, who was like half my age, was reading one of my books. And I said, Mary, it's so great that you're reading that. I wrote that, and I got my start at Agalog at Camp Agawak. She said, what's Agalog? And I said, well, it turned out Agalog had died 30 years ago, 30 years earlier. So I went back to camp at age 59 to resurrect the Agalog. And now I've run an activity called Writing in the Woods. I stay for about 4 or 5 weeks. I love it. I am going back this summer. I will be fully vaccinated. The kids will travel in pods. I'm sure you have grandchildren or children that missed out on the summer camp experience this year, um, who are eager to go back. Camps are opening in a totally different way. Once you go to camp, you don't leave camp. There's no parents visitors weekend. The counselors can't go out and meet, you know, with the boy camps at the bars like we did. Um, you know, you're in camp. The girls are going to travel in pods and they're going to probably wear masks. Well, they are going to wear masks. And so it's going to be a different experience. I'm excited to go back again because so many of those camp friends are my history holders as well. My Camp Girl circle, which was the inspiration for writing Camp Girls, is all about um, friendship and community and loyalty and tradition and all those basic core values that we learn as children, hopefully, that carry us through successful adulthoods. It's pretty amazing to think about Temple and being a kid and going there. And I just remember there was Israeli bubble gum sold in the gift store, and it was like this big stick of gum, and you couldn't chew it in class. But my mom used to sneak me a piece, you know, maybe sometime before class, and I just remember trying not to chew it while I talked or responded. Mr. Jablin was cool. He would never ever have cared about. He was so bohemian. And I also remember when he died, I wrote a letter to one of his kids, and I thought of that often and wanted to find him. So having a Holocaust survivor in your immediate family, as many of you know, teaches you to live urgently, to embrace every day, and most of all, the eggshell thin line that separates life from death. And I think that and so urgency is certainly at the root of a lot of the things that I've done and do. I, you know, really admire my mother's as a role model because she lived 20 years. She was only 65 when my dad died suddenly, unexpectedly, and she carried on. She went to work at Lord and Taylor, where some of you probably saw her. I know that Norma Berlin remembers going into Lord and Taylor and having her say, Norma, you know, she had a very strong accent. And I know that that really is at the root of life. And I know that also, and I hear in my new role as the editor of this ARP publication called The Ethel, and it's a free online uh, publication, and it's really edgy and informative. And I'd love you to subscribe if you wanted. But I know I hear from a lot of, I'm in charge of assigning stories and thinking of stories, and a lot of people who write to me, men and women, and he tell me that the pandemic has really slapped them awake. I got a query letter yesterday from somebody that said, I want to write about how the pandemic has slapped me awake into living urgently in the moment. I think that my sister, brother, and I were slapped awake decades ago, just from our own family. And if Hitler didn't get us, nothing could get us. And so that has really been such an empowering, very sad, but especially now as we all live in a culture where anti-Semitism is certainly on the rise, racism and a lot of other isms that have been triggered in recent years. And I won't veer into politics, um, but we all really know how hard we have to fight. Sometimes to be Jewish, to celebrate being Jewish. I was always so proud to be Jewish. And people often ask me, growing up in Oak Park, did you feel um, uh, anti Semitism? And I'll tell you two stories. I'll tell you one of mine is that my friends who were largely Catholic, my closest friends at Horseman School, the girls were all Catholic, Italian Catholic, Irish Catholic. They loved coming to our house. It was like a National Geographic special. They loved latkes. My mother, they loved Hanukkah. They loved Hanukkah Gelt. And I mean, it was a different house. And I never felt, my mother would come to school and talk about her experience during the war, and she would talk about Hanukkah and really continued to do that. I remember she came to one of my high school classes taught by Mrs. King, Clara King, who some of you might remember you had. She was very influential in my writing career as well. She was the first teacher that I had that wrote on the top of one of my papers, "Get this published." I can't tell you what that felt like as a 15-year-old. Um, but we all live right now in a culture where we're you know maligned uh, and worse, murdered, uh, and I'm hoping that as that we're entering a new dawn where people will fight for equality and fight for diversity and fight for that assimilation to succeed, which Mr. Jablin, I just remember that word and I loved spelling. And I remember when he wrote it on the word on the blackboard, he forgot one of the S's. And I I said, "Oh, Mr. Jablin, it's spelled wrong." And he was so oh, I don't know. I just, maybe all of you have a teacher that really, really affected your life. Another story is that we lived right near Eugene Field Playground, and one of the boys on the playground called my sister a dirty Jew, and she came home and told my mother that happened, and my mother picked up the telephone. Their phone number was in the Horseman. You used to get a little handbook where everybody's address, name, and phone number was. And I just remember the vein was throbbing in her neck. And you remember those old phone, I mean, I actually miss those phones, like the phone that you would pick up and you would go like this. And I'm thinking of our pine paneled kitchen. Uh, and she picked up the phone and she just screamed at her. She said, Mrs. I'm not going to, Mrs. X, Hitler is dead. How dare you? Hitler is dead. And I just, to this day, I just remember those three words. And also, I remember her rage. And I also remember and hope that um, I've never had to confront a parent about one of our kids. But one of the things about teaching college is that there's a lot of mixed opinions among college kids, as you know, about Israel, about separating their Jewishness from their political, and we have a lot of conversations about that. And it's interesting also, and I'll share this, and then we'll maybe have some questions because I've gone on and on. But when our four sons, and none of them are married yet. My sister has three beautiful grandchildren. We just have a grand dog, and who's a really beautiful dog, believe me. In fact, if any of you have a nice Jewish girl, anyway, I'm not going to go into that. Um, so, but I do remember that I really, really feel so rooted in this temple that you still all belong to, and that there's people on this call that have vivid memories of our own parents. And the way you keep people alive is through oral history and through memories. And, as I look at my my kindergarten Zoom group, and of course my sister and brother, I'm just really grateful, as I know you are too, that we've had this gift of Zoom to stay connected, and even in a more powerful way. I can't wait to get my second shot and, maybe walk into a grocery store, which we haven't. I had a mild case of COVID in January. Um, and as my doctor says, I mean, anyway, and we've all been through this dark year, really, of fear, some loneliness, a lot of depression, and we've had our connections. I know that your temple has Zoomed regularly because I still get messages from the temple. Thanks for keeping me on the list for 46 years or however many. But it's really the connections through Jewish people and through people that have kept us alive and thriving and happy. People always ask me what my next book is going to be. And I don't write a book every year like some mystery writers and some fiction writers. It takes me 2 years or 3 years to really think about what it is I may want to write about. My literary agent says, maybe, 7 books is enough. It's never enough if you love what you do. So I'd love to hear from any questions. Peter, did you have any questions? I said that you got the first question.
Well, thank you for being with us. And if anybody does have questions that they want to ask Iris, I would, I think with this crowd, raise your hand or jump right in.
Yeah, just comment. Yeah, jump right in. And especially if you have memories of either of our parents, that would be so empowering for us. I know that Phyllis Barron we were on earlier, and she was saying that she remembered all our family so well.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about your most recent book on camp and what brought you to write about it, and what is it that appeals to you about the summer camp?
Well, what appealed to me about summer camp, for one, is that it's a community that's geared all towards children having fun and play. And because of summer camp, I made lifelong friends, but I also, we came of age before Title IX. And I was very athletic, but you played half court basketball, or the boys played t-ball, and I went to ballet, which I hated. And so I would say first and foremost, other than the community of friends, is that we got to be turned into athletes, that we going to summer camp in the early 60s. And some of you on this call may have gone to summer camp too and loved it. I just loved it. I can, do a flip on the trampoline, canoe, kayak, run fast, play kickball, play softball, basketball, all those sports that were like, quote, for the boys. we got to do. You didn't get to do that pre-Title IX. You know, the girls come to camp now, they're on soccer teams, they're on lacrosse teams, they're on tennis teams. But the core of camp girls, really, the spine, I use the word the spine at all, is how lessons learned in the woods, independence. My sister and I were sent on an overnight train at 8 and 9 with no cell phones to Woodruff, Wisconsin. I mean, we waved through it to our parents through a darkened dusk window, and there we went. I think they went to Europe that year. And so, you know, so you learn independence, you learn collaboration, you learn team building. Someone picks on you in the cabin, which always happens. There's no mommy to run to. So all those, you know, my chapters are called ambition. Oh my gosh, you really wanted to win. There was two teams, a blue team and a white team. And once you were a blue, you were a blue for life. And at 16 years old, I was the blue team captain, and my kids still introduce. It was the highlight of my life. And you may notice in this background, this is a horse. I did win the horse show in 1970, and this is still here. And so many of those accomplishments that you had at camp, you know, when my kids introduced me, because I talk about the blue team so much and being captain and you know, getting the girls out there to really compete and really be physical. Um, my kids sometimes introduce me. This is my mom. She's an author, and she was the blue team captain in 1970. And they know all our camp songs. So I love camp. It's like a big kibbutz. I mean, and when I went, it was predominantly Jewish. We lived in Oak Park. And so we met all these girls from the North Shore, which predominantly was the camp population. And so we made friends all over Chicago, all over Illinois. And that was powerful. But what propelled me to write this book, which I would not have been able to write at the age of 20, was that at 60, when I started the book at 64, looking back at a long life, I realized that the core qualities of who I am, the good, the bad, the mischievous, the adventurous, the athletic, the versatile, the ability to be a good, loyal friend, those roots are all at summer camp. Those roots are, you know, you live with someone 24/7. You go to school with people and you start at 9 and you leave them at 3. Even though they become good friends, when you're sleeping nose to nose in a freezing cabin at night, we didn't have electricity when we grew up. The Cokes were a nickel. No, I'm kidding. But now, you know, and I also wrote the book because what I've noticed, I have 4 boys, so it was fun to go back and be with, you know, girl power. Um, I also wrote the book just because the girls are so different now. They are overscheduled. Their parents have them studying for ACTs and SATs as early as freshman year. They're outposting each other on social media. By the way, there's no computers allowed at camp. There's no cell phones. They're taking advanced courses so they can beef up their resume and get into very competitive colleges. They're on tennis teams, uh, soccer teams, lacrosse teams. So they come to camp to chill. We came to camp to unchill. They come to camp to chill. And so really that observation about change was also at the heart of the book. So and I love the book. You know, I really, really, this might be my favorite book that I've written because it was just like this unleashing of history. And those of you who have a book in you, um, I shamelessly, or I mean, shamelessly say that I work with people who want to publish individually to get you to the book proposal stage and the author stage. And I take a couple clients every month. So anyway, what else? Does anybody have any comments or questions? Norma, what do you remember about Helene?
Oh my goodness, she was probably the most vivacious, fun-loving person. And Sylvia Lerner, her friend.
Shirley Goldberg.
Yeah, there was just, oh God, Shirley. Her son Jeff still belongs to the synagogue. He lives in Michigan, I think, but he still comes for the high holidays. And your mom, there wasn't a soul in that place that didn't love your mom, because she just was a lot of fun and she knew everybody and loved everybody. And, you know, your mom and your dad, I mean, your dad was this tall, striking, you know, guy. And I mean, my husband was president of the synagogue for 3 years in the 70s, and Phyllis's husband was. And, you know, you talk about Al Jablon. Esther, his wife, was the secretary. She was, Howard and I still talk about her. She was just the most unbelievable
Yeah,
person.
I forgot to mention her. I
Yeah,
love her.
she knew everybody. She knew your name. She knew your kids' names. I mean, she just was an amazing person. And of course, Howard and I just loved Rabbi Tabachnik so
Yeah,
much.
I didn't mention, you know, Rabbi Tabachnik became a really, really good friend. And during the time that Howard was president of the temple, my dad was well, he always was vice president.
Vice president.
For a long time. And I just remember, you know, their engagement in Jewish causes has really inspired, I know, us. And I'm on the board of the Jewish Museum of Maryland, which has been so, I'm a new board member, and it's been so exciting uh, to just stay connected, but not connected in a member way, stay connected in a leadership way. And
Is Manny your age or Franny's age? Manny Tabachnik?
Manny Tabachnik is, I'm not sure how old my
Or
sister.
maybe Rena, one of them I know
Yeah,
probably.
I do.
Rena's a year old. Rena's a year older, and Manny is a little older. They're both a tiny bit older than I am.
The
And I'm
funniest thing was when,
Manny's 71, 70.
okay, when Miriam Tabachnik passed away, we went to Rena's house to pay a condolence call. And we both thought it was Rabbi Tabachnik standing there. Manny has turned
Oh,
into
right.
Joe Tabachnik.
I know. Well, it was Joe Tabachnik was such a good friend,
Yes.
really personally. You know, Nancy, I'm going to put you on the spot, Nancy Warner. I mean, your mom's was really so active for such a long time in the temple, wasn't she? And
yeah, to live to 102. She not only was active in the temple, but she was a lifelong Oak Park resident. My grandparents were founding members of the temple. You know, I was very fortunate to have an extended family. My cousin Debbie's on the call. I had first cousins, my aunt and uncle Chuck and Gloria Markman, and my grandparents, Rosalie and Simeon Markman. We were all part of the temple family, as well as our own extended family. And my mother was quite a force, and she lived a long time. She was president of the sisterhood. I think my father, when he was alive, was president of the temple. He died very young. And the temple was very inclusive and supportive to us, as well as our extended family after my father's death.
Yeah, and she was very good friends with my daughter-in-law, Linda Brodsky's aunt, Madeline Schiffman. They were big buddies.
Yeah, there was a book club that my mother
Right.
and my aunt and uncle were part of. And this book club was all, at the time, young couples who were associated with the synagogue, a lot of them from Elmwood Park, where we lived at the time. And they were together for over 60 years. And Madeline Schiffman and the Silvermans were part of it.
Right,
And
yeah.
the Gorans, and you know, we grew up with all that extended family. That was another part of us. And when everybody kind of moved, like my mother first went to Brookdale, the independent living place on Ontario Street, and they had the book club there because Irene Gorin was there. So it was very nice that my mother had a pal there who could help look after her. And then when my mother had to move on, we had to put her in Belmont Village, which is the assisted living place in Oak Park. They then came to Belmont Village, the people who were able to continue with the book club, and everybody talked about it.
Well,
You know,
Irene is still there.
yes, Irene
Yes, isn't it Irene's daughter who did the design for the Talit covers that?
Yeah,
as
she
a-
was a needlepoint.
behind Peter.
Yes.
Well, Nancy's mom really brought together a great group. Does anyone want to talk about book writing or any other question I can possibly answer? You know, it's so great to see Debbie Markman Finon, who lives in Israel. And so our Zooms are so interesting because we hear about Israel through the news, but then we really hear the real scoop from Debbie, who I think was the first of us to be able to get vaccinated. I got to tell you, getting vaccinated in Maryland, finally my husband and I had to go to, and we a CVS in Little Italy, Baltimore, to get it, but happily we're doing it. Does anyone else have any kind of questions or comments about anything? Holly, you want to share anything? Holly? No.
There, I was trying to unmute. My sister's on the call. Certainly we had left
Hi, Judy.
Elmwood Park.
Hi,
Judy's
guys.
there. But have remained involved and engaged at the temple. Certainly Judy has. And every year, such a fond memory would be coming back as an adult, because that is what I did for Yom Kippur, and sitting with my dad in shul was so heartwarming and probably some of the happiest times of my life. But as Nancy talked about her grandparents starting the temple, our grandparents also, both sides of the family were instrumental in starting the temple, but our parents met at temple when they were 5 years old. So there's such a rich history and fondness and love for West Suburban. And, we're talking about Rabbi Tabachnik. I remember Rabbi Babin.
Me too.
And certainly Harold Cantor. And I have never, ever found another cantor that has moved me more than that man's voice. So, Iris talks about how we grew up and the things that made us who we are. And I have to say that certainly West Suburban Temple is at the heart of who I certainly am as a person, as a wife, as a mother, as a sister, as a grandmother, blessed with grandchildren. And my husband was converted by Rabbi Tabachnik when we were 20. So, these memories, they're priceless. And to see the Berlins, because we talk about you and those boys.
You were just the cutest little girl always. And Judy looks like Barbara now. I can't get over it.
It's frightening, Norma. When I see my sister, she's definitely Babs and my mother, but those are the things, right? And
it's so
I also taught kindergarten with Mrs. Goldman when I was in high school. And I don't know if you remember her, but that was later on. But every story that Iris shared today resonates, I think, with all of us. And the five of us being able to be together again. Iris writes an article about the lost and found of COVID. And, the losses are enormous, but the found is so rich, and bringing us all together this way is a gift beyond measure. So I will stop talking. And it's just been such a treat to be able to re-engage with Temple, because I have not set foot in Temple, I would say, since my dad left Chicago to move to Rochester to live his last 2 years of life with us. And I miss that spirituality. I've never been able to obtain it in any other congregation since. So I will stop.
So sis, do you want to add, are you still in touch with any of your temple friends, or do you remember any of your teachers?
I certainly remember Mr. Jablin, and I remember being confirmed. And I remember that Mr. Jablin always had some racy discussions.
Not racist, racy.
No, racy. He
Yeah.
was never racist.
He was edgy.
I'm sorry, I was what?
He was edgy.
He was very edgy.
Yeah,
He kept us interested. I mean, he did in a very appropriate way discuss sex in our confirmation class and in the class before that, and everything that led up. He would have some sexual allusions that were not inappropriate, but he knew how to keep
from the Bible.
I'm not sure which Bible those came from, but he did have stuff that kept everyone's interest. I know that by confirmation class, we were not reluctant to go to class. I also remember from dating Holly's brother. That would be a synagogue accomplishment. And Steve and I dated for a while. I don't know that that's a big accomplishment, but it was very nice to know him.
Definitely a temple connection.
It was definitely a connection. And I have, look, what Holly said is right. I don't think I've ever, and we're still conservative. I don't think I've been in any congregation that's clicked. I'm in a very large, we're at Bethel in North Shore suburban Bethel in Highland Park, which is a great congregation. And I really love it. We're very integrated. Seth has been on the board for many years, my husband. But it doesn't have the warmth or the Hamish character that West Suburban had. West Suburban was very special. I actually did what you're doing before there was such a thing as Zoom. I came and spoke on the ADL, and I'm actually now the upcoming chairman of the 6th state region. So maybe I'll come back if you guys want to
Good.
hear about, yeah, it's a pretty big deal. It's for 22 to 24. We got a very good Jewish base through West Suburban Synagogue. Iris is a leader in her synagogue. I've been very active in Jewish activities in Chicago the entire time that I've been an adult. And I remember I was in the multi-purpose room. What is the big room that
Yeah, that's the room I was saying. Greg, do you
What-
remember what that room was called?
You mean the community hall?
Yeah,
Colleague Hall, huh?
Community hall,
Yeah.
yeah.
and I think
Yeah.
the Berlins were there when I came, but it's a unique experience. It was unique to come from a non-Jewish suburb, what I perceive to be a non-Jewish suburb. I think it strengthened our Judaism. I tell people that that West Suburban drew from 12 suburbs to have one synagogue in River Forest in Highland Park. We used to have like 12 synagogues for one suburb. We don't anymore, but at one point there were a lot of synagogues in Highland Park.
So I
So
think, Greg,
it was great.
do you have any memories of the temple that you want to share? Greg in Arizona?
They remember more about me than I remember about them, probably.
Yeah. You were the car guy, right?
I'm a car guy. Yeah, this is
Car
my
guy.
custody room here.
When I told Greg, I said, Greg, Mr. Godfrey might be on the call.
Oh,
And
He
he
took over
remembered.
one of our classes after Mrs. Lewinson gave up on it.
What did he
this
do?
is-
And I was
Yeah.
in there with Jeff Brodsky. I think Andrea Barron was in there with us too for a year or two.
Well, I was waiting to mention, to say, Mr. Gottlieb, he was our guy. And I still remember his mouth when he would talk to me. And I wanted to go to a Jewish camp because my cousins from New Orleans were going there. So I went to Camp Ramah,
Oh, good.
my parents to let me go. I was 10. And he tutored me in Hebrew because I had to be able to read cursive writing to go to Camp Ramah.
Wow.
So that was kind of cool. And my bucket list is to be fluent in Hebrew, and I'm still not, but I got a lot in here, And then you guys are just a couple years older than me, but I have to say, I always remember your mother talking to Greg from the alley when we were on the playground at Man. I think your house backed up to the alley, right?
Yes.
He was probably talking in a pretty loud voice.
Well, I can hear her voice.
I
And
know.
then the other thing is that Mr. Regalin,
Oh, Mr.
when I
Rose.
went to the Holocaust Museum in Skokie, they had a picture of him in there.
I think he's
Okay.
still alive, Andrea. He's
I
like,
don't know, but it just blew my mind because he was so much fun, but I didn't understand the depths of him when he was one of my teachers, and I wasn't the biggest fan. I liked going to Hebrew school, but I did help people ditch that were older than me, and my mother would see them on the mall, stuff like that. But Mr. Regalin, they had a picture of him in the Holocaust Museum as a soldier in Israel after the war. And I think Debbie and I might have talked about that on Facebook, something like that. But I just kind of wanted to throw them out into the mix because Mrs. Lewinson too, I can still hear her talking. And I remember writing stories in Hebrew about things like Man from Uncle and stuff like that, Us writing stories, but we could integrate, things that were current in our lives, but they were trying to teach us how to be fluent.
Well,
There was a lot. And
you're-
I live in Highland Park now too. So, I totally appreciate what Fran was saying because I kind of felt a loss when I moved and I never joined a synagogue because it wasn't right. I did sit for a rabbi. I ran a daycare out of my home and one of the rabbis in my neighborhood, a woman, I had her newborn. And so then when I used to go to her synagogue for the holidays and things like that, but
as you're talking, what
Sure.
I'm thinking about? I'm thinking about us getting out of temple and all of us congregating like on that patio, and you know, and frankly feeling a sense of a bit of relief, you know, but just like sort of basking in the sun. But I love your memories. In our last couple minutes, does anybody else want to ask a question about anything? Yes, Judy. Do you go by Judith now?
No, Judy, that's just my
Okay,
work
I
thing.
remember you so well as this little,
Tag along.
no, just a beautiful child.
With a beautiful long
Thank you.
ponytail.
Yeah,
Yes.
I
No
remember
more.
your whole family. I certainly remember Steve
Yeah.
and Holly, who I'm going to Zoom with today at 2, and we're going to talk about all of you. Okay, go on, Judith.
No, I was going to say, I still go to West Suburban. And I still sit on the same side where my family always sits. And this year was a very different experience. So I'm hoping by fall of this year, we'll be back to the same community we've always been. Oh, there's Jilly.
Yeah, I want to hear from Jill, definitely.
And I don't know, Norma, we should get them all to come back for one of the holiday services, because the new rabbi is wonderful. But it's just this very special congregation. And I drive from Morton Grove to go to services there, but
I'm sure that, you know, we went to Prince Castle's, and I'm sure some of you went to Parkies for hot dogs, and other of you guys went to where the
Peterson's.
Johnny's for beef.
Johnny's.
Oh my God, I could taste those. Jill Holden is on the call with her mask on. Jill, do you want to share anything? Can you talk? Not. We have to unmute Jill. Peter, you have to unmute her.
Okay, I got it. I am at work, so I have to talk kind of softly. I'm on a set for Nike, and
Jill's an actress,
but not in this case.
Actor, not actress. You don't call me.
I'm studio teaching today. West Suburban, yeah. I mean, you know, when my mother passed away, which I can hardly say out loud because it makes me cry. We had Stuart Figa came and did the funeral for us, and we just wanted to be West Suburban, you know. We wanted to bring her home, and even though she lived with me at the time in California, we flew her home to be. I didn't know I was gonna cry. At West Suburban. So, and Rabbi Tabachnik married me in my parents' condo in 1994, my first marriage. And you know, you never leave West Suburban. You don't. I wish now. I heard Holly. I wish I had come home for Yom Kippur, but I didn't belong to a synagogue, and I was in LA being an actress, and all my single friends or people who were Jews but couldn't afford to belong to a synagogue because we were all so broke, we would all come to my house, about 30 of us. And we've been doing services that I lead for since 1989, every year for Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Passover, and Hanukkah. I have a congregation that I'm the
Jill, I want to tell you something funny about your dad.
Would you?
I think it was 1967 or 68. It was like a dinner dance, okay? Yeah, I was very young then. So I think I had a dress that was white with cotton lace, and it was in tiers all the way down, and I had a permanent. And your dad came up to me and he said, "Norma, are you little Bo Peep?" That was your dad.
Do you remember for the Opan class, you guys had this one sentence you had to learn, Abba Ima Mitzal Salim, which I think was like the doorbells ringing. But yes, my father would.
That was Opan.
At Opan,
yeah,
it became a family joke. We said Abba Ima Mitzal Salim to answer any question for 40 years. So how's it going today? Abba Ima Mitzal Salim.
I thought it was the phrase was Efo Derech Mogan a David Adom or something like that, you know, or something like that. It was where's the road?
That's funny.
Yeah.
Peter, could you unmute Linda?
I think Peter let a little message that he had to leave. He had another thing to go to.
All right, but I should be able. So Linda can't. Linda, can you unmute yourself?
Just go up to the top right corner on
Yeah.
your box and you can click on the 3 dots and you can unmute yourself.
Yeah. Okay, good. Well, I know I'm anyway, Linda, if you're not able to talk to me, you certainly, and I'm going to let everyone, you certainly can, you could actually call me if you'd like, or you can just, why don't you email me at iris.krasnow@gmail.com, and I will either, I'm happy to talk to you if you'd like to talk. And, it's not like I'm going to the opera or a fancy restaurant there today. But this has been so heartwarming. I can't even tell you. My favorite line of all of yours, I have to give it to my brother, where I asked him if he remembered anything about the temple. And he said, I think they remember me more than I remember them. When I said to Greg that Mr. Godfrey was going to be on the call, he said that he remembers he used to say, could you turn around? What did he say, Greg? He said,
He said, turny front,
turning front.
turny front. And Mr. Regalan, who I had completely forgot about until I heard his name, he used to rule our classroom with a drumstick.
Right.
And the side of his desk, the right side of his desk, was thoroughly beaten from that drumstick. And he might have
Tough Israeli guy.
But
he must have struck my desk once or twice. too.
But at least he didn't use it on there. It was not corporal punishment. Anyway,
He never beat me.
I'm going to defend Greg for a minute. So in defense of Greg, for someone who never once, and I think this is true, never once completed a complete Hebrew school class, Greg got sent home early every single time. I think without exception. He aced his bar mitzvah. I was so nervous for his bar mitzvah, thinking, how is he ever going to do that? Because he never learned Hebrew, because he never finished a class. And he got up there and he absolutely aced it.
yeah,
So stop picking on my little brother.
we're not picking on him. It's just.
Would you like to hear my Haftarah right now? I
and
remember every word of it.
do you really?
You can come back and do it anytime, Tanner Siegel will be happy, right, Andrea?
Phyllis, I really want you to be in touch with me, because I saw your text that when Al Jablin died, your husband went to his house and helped his wife with his clothes. And I mean, that is just so moving to me. And I'd really love it if you could connect me with any of the Jablin offspring. Anyway, everyone be well.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was fun.
Thank you.
It means so
Bye,
much.
everyone.
Bye.
Nice.
Bye, Greg.
Thank you.
And
Bye-bye.
my Zoom group, I'll see you guys at 2. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.